Greetings, English 3 students. Today we're going to read Long Distances by Jewell Parker Rhodes. I just found this story recently and I fell in love with it immediately. Relatively contemporary story. This author is still alive. She teaches at Arizona State and she just seems like a cool lady. Let's read this story. Remember, we're keeping a special eye out for figurative language, any language that can't be taken literally. Keep that in mind. We will have talked about it in class. Long distances. Nate couldn't remember the moment when it had happened, let alone why. Was it in the supermarket buying kidney beans or touring through Allegheny Park with its man-made pond when he knew just from looking at her he would have to go to California? Knew from fixed stares, drooping mouth, her restlessness. Knew he'd have to leave his humid and river-choked valley with its steel mill-sooted hills to drive across plains, Rockies, and desert until sand gave way to heaving ocean. And for what? Her dreaming? 3,000 miles. A man could get lost. Della showed him a postcard picture book of California. Flat-topped roofs and pastel stucco. Palm trees bent by breezes. He'd be trapped by distance. Sunshine. We'll be pioneers, Della said. He wondered if he'd miss shoveling snow, crushing ice while sprinkling salt, if he'd miss the ugliness of brick homes with rain slicking off slant roofs into mud-packed gutters. He'd never see the Three Rivers overflow. Would he miss driving over cobblestones, getting his wheels caught by streetcar tracks the city was too cheap to dig up, or parking on hills with the clutch in, the tires turned toward the curb? He'd miss his mother. For what? Della's dreaming, or his fear she'd go with or without him? No matter. Nate had traded in his muscle Chevy for a Dreamboat Chrysler, a 300 with a red interior that wasn't as bright as the red metal outside and never would be. The skinny-ass man who sold him the car said it would get him around the world if that's where he wanted to go. He said he didn't, but Della had been sold with that line. And here he was driving on a stretch of highway about ready to cross into Indiana. Welcome. A truck was coming out of Indiana, flicking its headlights to low. It started to rain. He turned on his windshield wipers, its high beams. Night driving was dangerous, but Della couldn't wait another day. Had to leave at midnight to make better time. Now she and the kids were sleeping. He looked at the trip odometer. 270 miles. At least 2 more days and nights of driving. 800, 1,000 miles a day. No unnecessary stops. No motels. Della needed to get to Los Angeles fast to make it big. Somehow. He'd drive until his mind warped and then maybe he'd forget his guilt. Forget his mama's unnatural quiet. Forget her solemn shuffling about the house. Forget her leaning over a porch railing, watching them pack up as if she couldn't believe it. Forget her refusing to say or wave goodbye. Nate wished he had a drink. He'd promised to call his mama from Wheeling, but it had seemed like too soon. He plain forgot to call at Dayton. He looked in the side mirror and saw the Ford his father-in-law, Ben Williams, was driving. Ben was no comfort. For weeks, Ben told folks at the Pier Point bar, "No way I'd allow my baby girl travel from Pittsburgh to L.A. alone." "What you mean alone, Ben?" "Nate's going. He's her husband, ain't he?" Then Ben Williams would puff his chest, suck his gut, and glare until the person nervously admitted, "Ain't right to let a woman travel alone, not with 2 kids." A dozen slicks and lowlifes had told Nate that Ben was drinking bourbon and calling him a faggot. But what was he supposed to do? Beat up an old man? Have his wife holler? Nate gripped the steering wheel. Since the first time he called on Della, the old man kept one-upping him. Nate remembered being 17, squirming on a plastic-covered sofa, his hands itching with sweat. Ben Williams, an ex-cop, had a bit of money. He had a bit of Irish, too. He was a freckled-faced Negro, and proud of it. Nate was just poor and black. Ben Williams slipped in questions like artillery fire. "Where you been, boy?" "Home." He remembered how his plain, brown-faced mama could make a run-down house seem like the world. Make you never want to leave. He promised he'd never leave. Where you going, boy? Work, sir. I'd be wanting my own butcher shop. He liked the feel of a cleaver ripping away flesh from bone and the soft whishing sound of bloodied sawdust beneath his feet. What do you want with my girl? That one he couldn't answer. Looking at Della with her head leaning up against the window and slightly cocked back, breathing through her nose in a slight snore, he still didn't know. Now she didn't look so pretty, and when she was angry, she seemed less so. Maybe it was the old man that made him want her. Him with his attitude that his baby girl was so special, and Nate was just another no-good hood from the streets. Nate sighed, pressing the aching small of his back into the vinyl seat. He was 28, still poor and black with a wife longing for the opportunities of California. She used to long for him. At 15, Della was eager to do it anywhere. He remembered her hitching up her dress, begging him in the laundromat. Together they moaned he had a kid. Together they moaned he had a kid. Responsibilities. Della was smart. She finished school. He dropped out to cut beef full time. How his mama screamed. Wasn't a man supposed to support his family? What choice did he have? Another pretty baby. Della was less eager to do it. She started spreading her legs again when she started talking California. When he'd admitted he was scared that if the family couldn't make it in Pittsburgh, they couldn't make it anywhere. She pressed him down upon her breasts, reminding him while he suckled that he'd promised California. He rubbed himself between her thighs until the world and regrets faded. That's not quite inappropriate. Sorry about that. Mama never liked Della. She attracts men like bugs to flypaper. Her uppity dad is a yellow fool. Her mama is just as bad. Then she would grin, smack her hips before uttering her final condemnation. Spoiled. The smell and sound of stale heat passing through vents sickened Nate. He felt like rolling down the window, but the cool wind would cut right back to the children. His two daughters, Carrie and Jackie, almost smothered beneath blankets, were two squirrely balls in the back. He wondered when his mama would see her grandkids again. No more dressing them in white and carrying them to church to sing, shout, and praise the Lord. Who would she rock and sing lullabies to? It was his fault they were leaving. Damn it. Why couldn't he say no to Della? He should have called his mama from Dayton. A yellow sign with a vertical ripple told him the road up ahead was curved. Nate took one hand away from the wheel. His right hand adjusting the turn of the wheel was all he really needed. He loved the feel of cars, even this one, and as the green fluorescent speedometer showed his increase in speed, the better he felt. 70, 75, 80. Without looking in the mirror, he knew the old man would be straining his car to keep up with him. He could just about hear Ben Williams cursing. Sorry. Ben needed to be with his daughter more than he needed to breathe. What do I need? Nate thought. As the asphalt turnpike straightened itself out, Nate lowered the speed. He didn't understand his feelings, but it didn't much matter. If he understood everything, he'd still hurt. Understanding didn't ease pain. He was 8 when his mama told him matter-of-factly his dad and Sandra were gone. They were at the kitchen table eating collard greens and rice. Even at 8, he'd understood the attraction of the neighbor woman with her flowery dresses and jasmine perfume. Him and his dad both laughed and smiled at her jokes. He understood his mama was too fat, awkward, and glum around Miss Sandra. Nonetheless, he'd kicked the wall and tried to hide his crying. That night he slept on his daddy's side of the bed, curled in the crook of his mother's arms, touching her round face. He promised he'd never leave. She didn't ask him to say it, but he was 8 and thought words had power. For many nights thereafter, before uncoiling his wiry body against hers, he'd whisper, "I'll be here." And when he married, it was simple enough to live in the same house, 2 floors up, across the hall. Della hadn't threatened to take the kids. He couldn't even use that excuse. The car was pulling him farther away from his mother. At the point where the skyline met the road in his vision, Nate was sure he could see her, her breasts sagging, her eyes dim. Was there a difference between what the two of them were feeling? His mother flat in bed, hearing the sound of no one breathing. Him, maneuvering through rain, hearing the car and bodies exhaling the same heated air. Who would care for his mother? He wished he could turn on the radio. There were buttons to push rather than knobs to turn. Too much noise, though. Besides, he'd probably only get country. Nate wanted to piss and buy some coffee. A red neon sign blinked. Food, gas, 5 miles, Terre Haute. He would call his mother and tell her he loved her. He would get change, 100 quarters. Call her every stop from a payphone. First Terre Haute, then St. Louis, Topeka, Denver. Would she weep? He wanted to hit something. Wanted to run the car off the road. A twist to the right and into the embankment. Kill them all. Metal, concrete, blood. The car would pleat like an accordion. He wished he could see Ben Williams's face then. Yeah. What would Ben say seeing his daughter smashed up, her toes meeting her elbows, her head twisted off? What would Ben do? Nate missed the exit. A dairy truck hauling cows rumbled past. The rain was easing. He looked at his watch. 4:28 a.m. His mama was probably asleep now. He should wait till morning. After he crossed the Mississippi, Columbia, Missouri, then. He'd call her there. Veins popped up like worms along his hands. What if she refused to talk to him? He stumbled a bent cool out of his right pocket. He lit the cigarette, dragged deep, and smoke filled his lungs like a caress. He exhaled. Smoke blanketed the dash. He stubbed the cigarette out. Della, he whispered plaintively. Della. Her eyes opened. Disoriented, she registered the night, the bold headlights whizzing by, Route 70 heading across the Wabash River and into Illinois. She turned her head to the left and looked at Nate. What is it? He grit his teeth and stared straight ahead at the road. Would you have gone without me? His voice was barely a whisper. The heater's fan kicked in again. Yes, she said. He felt like the time a line drive hit him in the gut. The wind went right out of him. Driving was easy, automatic. He concentrated on feeling the murmurs of the engine. The sky was clear. He switched off the wipers and rear window defrost. Della was sleeping. Kansas City. Maybe he'd call his mother then. She'd be up. 10 a.m. Monday was laundry day. She'd be gathering clothes, stuffing them into her basket to carry them down the first flight of steps. She needn't worry any more about shaking out sawdust, starching his collars, or lifting bloodstains from his shirts. He'd probably miss her if he called. When the phone would ring, she'd already be racketing her way down the basement steps. He'd call her that evening, after dinner, in Wichita. Maybe Colorado Springs. Yeah, she'd have more time to adjust to him being gone. Another 1,000 miles, he'd be in Los Angeles. His family needed him. Nate pressed his foot hard on the gas. Los Angeles, he'd call his mother there and tell her he loved her nonetheless. Pop? It was Jackie. Shh, you'll wake your mama and sister up. Carrie keeps kicking me in her sleep. She don't mean it. Nate watched his daughter scowl in the mirror. She was resting her chin on the top of the front seat next to his shoulder, her fuzzy blue blanket covering her head like a nun's cloth. Can I help drive? Come on, but be careful. Jackie lifted her tennis shoe foot over and onto the front seat. Nate, with his right hand, grabbed her by her collar and pulled her down between him and Della. Jackie shifted herself onto his lap. He relaxed, feeling her small hands gripping his 2 hands on the wheel. Wow, I ain't never drove on the turnpike before. You just keep your eyes on the road so none of us don't get killed. Jackie tightly clutched her father's hands. Can I turn on the radio? No. Oh, Pop. Nate nudged her head with the side of his jaw. Together they watched the road. A clear, straight line to the horizon. Him looking over the arch of the wheel, Jackie right beneath it. It felt good to have company. He needed the distraction. Look, there's a dog, Pop, running across the road. Nate didn't see anything, but he pumped the brakes anyway so Jackie could be satisfied they wouldn't hit the animal. And there, it's a raccoon, see it? Scooting across the road. Nothing's there. It is. Nate pumped the brakes. He felt his heart lighten at his daughter's silliness. He slowed for deer, a wily old fox. Ben Williams must be thinking he's driving crazy. Nate didn't care. Jackie was the child most like himself. Carrie took after Della, feminine and sweet when she wanted something. Jackie was the one who should have been a boy. Feeling her shoes bang his knees, her spine curling into his chest, and a stumpy braid tickling his chin, Nate felt more her father than any other time he could remember. They were alone in the car, driving to California. The sun was coming up. Angels are digging out the sun to wake up the world, said an awed Jackie, digging it right out of the earth. The sun doesn't come out of the earth. Does so, she said, fiercely whispering, staring at him through the mirror. Right now, it's half in and half out. Who told you that? Grandma. Nate felt shaken. He remembered his mama telling him such things too, telling him that stars were God's words in light, the moon his mirror, rainbows were the fluttering glow of angels' wings, the horizon was the blue gust of God's breath. All of a sudden his mother's presence was real. If Grandma said it, it must be true, Nate whispered. Jackie tried burying her face in his shoulder. I didn't want to leave, she said. I didn't want to go. Nate hugged his daughter closer, and feeling her soft shouldering sigh, he had a clear sense of what a damn fool he'd been. You think she'll forget me? Asked Jackie. Nah, he said. Your grandma loves you. She wouldn't let me kiss her goodbye. She was just hurt. Nate stared straight ahead at the gray roadway. He didn't want to look up and see Jackie's reflection in the overhead mirror. He didn't want to look up and see her looking at him. There's a cat, he said, pumping the brakes, trying to stop his headlong drive. In his mind, he lost the image of a road map. He couldn't see a red-marked line named 70 winding its way to California. He saw him and his daughter marooned in the car, whispering secrets. When the sun was halfway up in the sky, Jackie fell asleep. Her hands slipped off his hands, and he could feel her fingers lightly touching the hair on his arms. Jackie? All the women in the car were sleeping. In the side mirror, Nate looked yearningly at Ben Williams's car. He wished the old Ford would catch up with him. They could drive side by side past cornfields and wheat, at least until the Rockies. Sunlight was baking him. He couldn't slip off his jacket without disturbing Jackie. He cursed under his breath. In the grease-slicked patches on the road, he saw shreds of rainbows. The sun loomed. He knew angels were moving it. If Grandma said it, it must be true. Oh man, I love that story. God, I don't know if you caught where I fall apart there, but anything involving a father and daughter, you'll see someday, maybe. Hopefully, dudes. Hopefully you have a daughter or anybody. Anyway, I really do love that story, and it's another one of these stories where it's not super clear what the actual meaning of it is. And so we'll talk about that and try to tie it to figurative language. Awesome.